easier to swap back and forth.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, we'll just introduce ourselves as like one at a time as each thing comes up. So. Okay. Looks like people are still coming at you. Hey, make sure you guys are muted on the. Okay. Richard, are you muted on the? Cool. So when you guys are coming up to code, Micah's gonna have to leave his laptop here for the mic. So just,
I helped him try to.
So we should have one more person we're waiting on, so we're just waiting on the start here. He's done. Okay.
Picture too.
Sure. Yeah. All right. Hey guys. How's it going? My name's Landon. I'm a developer here at STG. Currently working at WGU on a contract, and we're going to go over some advanced Angular patterns from basic all the way up to advanced. This is really meant just to be an overview. It's going to point you in the right direction to get you guys where you need to be. So don't rely on this to give you all the answers, but definitely use this as a tool and an opportunity to look into it more. And with that said, here's our roadmap. So we're going to be going over presentation versus container components, and the pattern and how to use it and what the advantages are while using that pattern. We're going to go over state management using services. That's going to be done by Micah. And state management using NGRX Data, which is brand new, announced at NGRX, or sorry, at NGConf 2019 by John Papa. And then we're going to go over creating shared libraries with Angular CLI. So a bunch of really cool stuff. We are going to do questions. We're going to take a couple of questions. We are kind of pinched on time here because we only got an hour. So we're going to do maybe 1 or 2 questions per section here, and then we'll take as many questions as you guys want after the presentation. Presentation container versus presentation components. What are they? So container components are the components where you're going to put all your transactional data. Anything that you're going to be calling from services, anything that's going to be managing the state of the application, then you're going to want it to put it there. So as I said here, it says container components supply a data flow for the presentation components. Container components translate component-specific events to application states. And with that said, presentation components hold all of your visual states. So anything that's displaying visually should be inside of a presentation component. And we can look at this this image here. I pulled this from Angular in depth. Most of this comes from Angular in depth. I've provided some links there for you guys. And what we can see here is the top presentation layer. That's where all of your visuals are going to be, all of the anything to do with the UI and the state of the UI. That's where it should go. And they should be pure. And what does that mean? That means that they're not going to have any dependencies injected into them. They're not going to have anything that they're going to rely on specific to your application. As limited as possible. The exceptions with that are if you have libraries like Angular Material that you're using company-wide, or if you're working on one specific project and you're using stylings or other things like that that are specific to your project, then there is times where that's acceptable. And the articles that I linked go more in depth onto those edge cases. The container goes more into where you're going to store your business logic. So all your business logic is going to go into the container, as well as with the integration with your state management. So with your state management, that's going to be in your services. So you're going to use a lot of services to hook up into your containers, and then you're going to pass that state down into your presentation components. yeah, so with that, that's all I have for slides. Let's hop into this app here. This is purely a demonstration app. Please don't I spent like a whole 30 seconds on this, so please don't judge that way. Try to take away as much as the lesson as possible. So I created a finalized version and then the beginning version. So if you're new to Angular, you might be tempted to do something like this, where we create a to-do. So this is a whole to-dos app, and you might be tempted to do something like this and make a to-dos component. And if we look in here, it's just one component. It takes in a service, it takes in the type, and it's going to extract the to-dos into a list of to-dos. And you know, we might have some service calls inside on the component, and inside the template, if we look, we have all of our visual data inside this template. The problem with this is once you start scaling your application, that transactional data can be really, really complex. It can become, it's going to be specific to your department. It can be all the way down to specific to the exact problem you're solving. And with that type of complexity, you have to have some way to manage it. So what we do is we take that state, that code, and we're going to move it out into another component, which we call the container. And with that said, we might go about refactoring it. Sorry, I just got to get the display figured out now. So if we were going to refactor this into a sort of container component using the container presentation pattern, we might do something like this. So we'll have a to-do. We might even have a to-do list. Then we'll have the to-dos itself. So what I've done is I've broken this down into these three components, where the to-do is the item on the to-do list itself. So if we can see here, we have this to-do with this drop-down, right? And this drop-down here is the to-do. The to-do list is the list of all of those drop-downs, and then the to-dos itself is the container that's going to be binding these all together. So if we look, I'm going to start at the top level. So this is the container here. The container is going to take in this to-do service, which just stores the state of the application. It stores an array of to-dos and returns that back as an observable. So we get this to-do service. We extract we're going to extract the to-dos observable here, and then I have just a couple of binding functions to manage the state. Taking a look at the template for this, what we can see here is that we have the only thing. I actually forgot one important thing. So this right here, this code, should have been extracted into another component. Because this is the to-dos list. This is part of the to-dos list. But regardless, moving on. What this is going to do is we're going to get the list of to-dos, and we're going to bind to this custom component called app to-do list. We're going to bind to the to-dos and pass it in asynchronously. And what that means is that if you're brand new to Angular, what that means is we're going to pass in the observable, we're going to pipe it to the async pipe, and that's going to extract the value out of that async pipe. Or sorry, it's going to extract the value out of the observable and pass it in to that property using property binding. So what that allows us to do is keep our apps pure. It allows us to only rely on inputs and outputs. That makes things shareable, which is nice, because if you have a part of your app you want to use somewhere else, now you can use it somewhere else without worrying about any transactional data being lost, which is great, and that's what we want. So just to look at the to-dos here. Now I'm going to look at the to-dos list component. So this is the to-dos list component that we were just taking a look at in the template, and what you can see is we have this input of to-dos. And this is going to take in a to-dos array. Notice how it's not an observable anymore. This is an array of to-dos, right? Because using that async pipe, we extract it. And all we do in this is we're just going to make a map accordion, which is part of the Angular material library, and we're just going to loop over this list of to-dos and pass in the data. So with that, we just loop over the to-dos, and I'm also saving the index. And we're just going to pass in for each of the to-do, we're going to pass in the to-do information itself. So again, now this is the expansion panel right here that we're taking a look at. And again, all it's doing is taking in the single to-do because we've looped over them at this point. And so now this component here is shareable. You can use this in any other project that you would want without worrying about dependencies, because we don't have any injectables, we don't have any services, we don't have any dependencies, which is fantastic. But the question arises: how do you get data back up to the services, right? Because if you have these presentation components that don't reference any services, we might need to pass data up that needs to be passed into the state. We're going to interact with this data, and it needs to be able to respond. So the way we do that is with these outputs and the event emitters. So we have this event emitter here. And all it does is it emits an event saying, hey, look, I want to be removed. And that gets propagated up through the to-do list here, where we bind to the same event here, and we emit it just this time with the index included, so it knows which one to remove. But the problem with that is it can get quite complex in nature, because in React they call this prop drilling, right? It's property binding drilling. You're going from one component to the next component, next component, next component, and that can be really troublesome. So Micah and Richard are both going to discuss how exactly you would want to, on a large app, manage more state like in a more proper way that way. But if you are going to do this, the acceptable rule is generally 3 or 4 levels down is acceptable. Anything more than that, you need to rethink your strategy. I'm guilty of it myself. I've written components where you're 7 layers down, and you're like, holy crap, man. You know, how can I get this event all the way up to the top? And it becomes a problem. But generally, this is going to allow you to separate components into reusable parts. It's going to be able to allow you to reuse these in different parts of your application. It's going to separate your transactional code from your presentation code, from your visual code from your transactional code, and it's going to allow you to manage state in a more separated way. It's all about defining what your components' responsibilities are. Separation of concerns. It's huge. That's what Angular is. That's all I got. Do you have any questions? No? Cool. All right. And with that, I'll introduce Micah.
I got a quick question. Sure. Look, the pattern you're showing, is this different than the pattern that they show, like say the Heroes tutorial? Is this pattern different here? How do you go with that?
I haven't looked deeply into it. Do they follow the container presentation model?
It's been a long time since I've done both Heroes, but it doesn't have that. I don't know, 2 years ago was the first thing out.
I just looked at it a few months ago.
Yeah, no, it didn't separate the presentation.
So Tour Heroes is really, because it's a demo app, right, it's just trying to flex the Angular tool itself, not the patterns necessarily. And Google doesn't lay out any of these patterns in their documentation or anything like that. And that's the biggest struggle with Angular is that you don't know what you're supposed to do. You just give them this tool and they tell you, go for it, right? But this pattern here, this was from John Papa. And if John Papa is he was on the Angular core team who helped build Angular. So this is true, tested, proven, and used in almost all Angular projects that I know of that are enterprise or professionally built.
Another quick question. What is the IDE you're using?
That's Visual Studio Code.
Oh,
this right here. Sorry, yes. So this is Stackblitz. It's an online IDE that allows you to do things like Angular development and things like that.
I'm assuming if we want, we can get access to these samples.
Yes. So all of this stuff we'll give you access to the slides, and then you'll have access to all the links that we gave you, and these will be included at the end.
And the sample code.
Absolutely. Yep.
I was hoping that maybe you could touch on the benefits of having tiered components in the presentation. Which, I mean, I understand, you know, the benefits of it, but just any other
So the obvious benefit that you're going to sorry, you probably won't hear me online. The obvious benefits that you're going to gain from using presentational components, and the one that's promoted the most is reusability. But even components that are not reusable, you will benefit from using a container presentation.
There's more separation of concerns.
It's separation of concerns. Although they'll always try to sell you on the reusability, the biggest benefit that you get is the separation of concerns. Because what you're doing is you're separating your business logic from the display logic, the logic that's going to deal with presenting. And we've worked on projects, Richard and I have worked on projects together where the complexity from the business logic is 100 times more difficult to maintain than the presentation code. If we intertwined those two things together, it would be near impossible to keep bugs from the presentation separate from the bugs or concerns of the transactional logic. Does that make sense? Yeah. Fantastic. Any other questions? Cool. All right. Micah?
Yeah. Okay. Quick introduction. My name is Micah. Also work at STG, and that's all you need to know. So let's go ahead and get started talking about state management. Specifically, I'll be going about how to handle state management while you're using services. And so if you're not familiar with what state management is, there's basically, you're doing it even if you don't know that you're doing it. It's kind of one of those things that it kind of happens ad hoc if you're not paying attention to it. And so there's a lot of problematic ways you can go about doing it. And so state management, all that means is basically you've got all these forms of state. So you've got server state, stuff in the back end. Persistent state, that's kind of your local version of the server state. So you made an API call, now you've got some data. It just exists in the client. The URL and the router, what page are you on, all of those things. And then there's client-specific state. So that's going to be transient, would be stuff that exists only on your browser. If you sent someone a link to it, they wouldn't necessarily see information there. And local UI state is just going to be, you know, is this thing expanded or collapsed? What color is this button? A bunch of stuff that just exists locally. And so state management, all that is how do you keep track of all of these different things? How do you synchronize it? If something happens in one place, how do you display it to the user? There's a lot of different ways you can go about that. And depending on the complexity of your app, all of them can be valid in certain situations. And so, like I was saying, if you don't think about it, it still kind of happens. And so, if anybody here is from the AngularJS days, you're probably familiar with root scope. That was kind of the shovel everything under the bed. I need this property here and here and here, so let's just throw it in there. Another common way of handling that would be session storage. Just throw something in session storage. Anybody can read it. Anybody can write to it. On a small application, it'll probably work just fine. But the moment you've got a bunch of things trying to read and write to it at the same time, causing weird conflicts where you've got a bug report, we have to go through these 20 steps to reproduce it. That's an obvious sign that you've got issues with state management. And yeah, another issue is if you've got, if you want to track changes to it, you've got to throw watchers in, which this is an AngularJS talk, but that's problematic. And so I've got kind of this weird issue where we're going to be talking about RxJS in the future. And so if you're a serious developer, you want serious tooling. So you're going to ignore my talk because we're going to get to the real complex stuff. Make it as complicated and enterprisey as possible. So I just want to point to the developer of Redux who has a popular blog post saying, you know what, you may not actually need it. It adds a lot of complexity, and in certain situations, it can make managing your state a breeze. But if you want to make changes to how your state looks, you're touching 10 files just to make the slightest change. And for any pedantic people in the audience, you'll notice that Redux isn't really what we're using. So I just added that, but the link is still the same. So we're going to just cruise through because we've got coding to show this stuff way better than slides ever would. So back to this. And all good coding examples involve some kind of very trite thing that you're trying to build. So let's say you've got a application where you want the user to be able to choose the favorite color, and you're going to style a portion of the UI to look like that. So we've got these 3 boxes, and if you look, the box component is real simple. It's just a styled div where you can put in your own content. And if you go to the component itself, it's not doing anything special. So yeah, the color of these boxes is going to be some form of state. And so right now, your requirements are just allow the user to choose a color. So you think, okay, that's real easy. We've got this boxes component, and that's just a, oops, boxes. There we go. And so right now, all it's doing is just displaying the boxes with the text that you specify. And so right now, the only thing you're told that you need to do is make it so that you can change the color of these boxes. So kind of the ad hoc way to do it is, say we've got some button that you can click to change the color. We're going to hard code a bunch of stuff to move through it. And then here, but not least, you want to make these smart components, or dumb components, to follow kind of that pattern we were just talking about. So you come in here, and we give it an input, which we'll call color, which is also string. And the final step, yes, we got 2 final steps. So now we can see we've got the background color being set to red when we click this button, and everything works. And if this is all you ever needed to do, this way of going about it makes total sense. The state just lives in this parent component. So you could think of the boxes component as the smart one. It keeps track of its state, and it just passes it down to the children, and they react accordingly. But then, say a new feature wants to get added. The UX person sees this and they're like, this is great. I want the user to be able to customize the colors on every page. And the designer is crying in the corner. And so now we've got this detail component separate from everything. And you want to be able to have colored boxes in it. So if we were to come in here and add a box, and go to content, you can probably already see the issue. It no longer has the color, and if we go back to boxes, that color is gone because it only existed for the lifetime of that component. So now we've got an issue of, okay, this doesn't really work. All we can do is let people update the color while they're viewing it, and then the moment they go back to it, it's broken. So now there's a few ways you could go about it. If you're just doing the ad hoc way, not thinking about it, what you'll end up doing is basically coming up with some way of sharing this thing. So let's say we go to our boxes component, and you do session storage dot, or what's that item, color red. And then in your other component, or in every component after that, you just read that value out of session storage. There's nothing to stop anybody from messing with it. And then you run the issue of how do you react to changes to it, because you'll only read it when that component is created. So that you can see this is already starting to break down. And then let's say they come back later and they say, oh, we want our users to be able to share their favorite colors. So now we want the link to specify the color, and you need to read from the link and set the colors that way. Now you've got to read from the session storage to see what was being done. You've got to check the URL, so you're porting the router into all of your components and subscribing. So this is a very stupid application, and you can see how quickly, depending on the features that are being added, you'll run into issues. And so if you kind of take a step back from it and not just kind of throw state around everywhere, you can kind of come up with some different ways of managing it. And so the way I'm going to propose is just using services. So everybody here, I'm sure, is familiar with services in Angular. It's just a class that you can inject into components. You can share the logic there. Most people just use it for HTTP calls. That's kind of the go-to answer for why do I need a service. But they also can be quite handy with just any code that needs to be shared easily. So if we go to our, I forgot what I called it. We got our box service. So right now there's nothing in it. So what we want to do is we want not only to be able to set the color, we want to be able to read the color, and we want any view to be able to react to changes to it. So it doesn't matter where the change comes from. If you change the URL, if you add a button later that can toggle the colors, you want everything on the page to react to it. And so that's kind of where observables come in. They're like a promise, but they can emit values indefinitely. And so you want to use an observable anytime you're thinking of, oh, I'm going to have changes over time. The problem with observables is there's not an easy way to emit new values into them. Everything's kind of self-contained. And so there's another thing that RxJS provides called subjects. And so that's kind of the main feature of using a service to track state. So we could have some kind of, so we can have some concept of a subject. And what a subject is it's both an observer and an observable, which sounds like jargon. Basically, all you need to know is you can emit values from anywhere in your code using the subject. So let's just import it. And so we'll have some kind of color, which is equal to this subject. So by doing as observable, what you're doing is you're hiding all of the subject-specific things. So none of that leaks outside of your service. And so you can call next all you want in your service, but if somebody tries to read the color, they can't manipulate the state themselves. They still have to rely on you. So kind of the quick and dirty way, you have an update color method. Takes a new color. And so now we need to push this value out. So we've got our subject, and we'll just call next and pass color. And so that's all you need to do. This now, anything can subscribe to this color property on your service and get access to the latest and greatest of the colors that the users selected. So real quick way of getting that set up. Yeah, we'll just do it from here. We'll do it in the constructor. We'll live a little. This is going to be an observable. I'm going to any-type it so you don't have to watch me deal with yeah, importing everything again. And so we've got our color, which is going to be equal to major color. And again, we're dealing with an observable, so we can async or we can subscribe directly. And add another update. What did I screw up on? Oh, it's public. I'm going to assume that. Yep. I'm just going to assume that VS Code is wrong unless someone else sees it. And again, button. Yeah. Okay, so let's go to here. Whoops. Oh, what do I call it? Update. Yeah. You guys are in like the most frustrating seat right now, seeing these obvious errors. Like, he's going to get to it eventually. Yeah, so that's great. If we come over to our box service, though, you'll realize we'll still have to subscribe to this service and kind of copy and paste this code. This is all happening over, weeks, and you think, oh, what's another service? Easy enough. Import it. You don't think anything. But then you have to add another page and another page, and it's all this kind of boilerplate. So sometimes, if you've got your presentation components, it makes sense to make them smart instead of dumb. So one thing you could do to get around this is you would go to your to the box component itself and just have it inject the service, subscribe to itself, and update its own color. So now it's responsible for its own state. Then you can just throw boxes everywhere on the application. In fact, we might as well just do that real quick. Don't take my word for it. Now color. As well. Follow best practices and orange. Right here. Now we go to detail. Stuff. What we're going to do is input color. There we go. And yeah, and so now everything's updating here. Boxes aren't being updated, and that is brings me to the difference. There's multiple subjects, basically. Smooth segue there. And so if we go back to our box component, or whoops, our box service. Okay, so you'll notice we're using a subject, and so There's multiple subjects, actually. So the first subject, well, first off, all subjects allow for multicasting. What that means is you can have multiple people subscribe to it, and they're not going to trigger the entire chain. When a new value is emitted, it will share that value with everybody. They don't need to run through it. So, for example, if you were to use a subject to make an HTTP call, you would just make one HTTP call instead of one for every system. Subjects themselves, though, only allow active subscribers to get a value, so they have no concept of state themselves. So if you're subscribed to it, you'll get that value. If you're not subscribed to it, you have no idea that value exists. If you subscribe to it in the future, you get nothing until a new value is nexted. And so behavior subject, if you want functionality that does that, behavior subject's going to be your friend. So behavior subject takes an initial value and then caches whatever value is passed to it next. So anything that subscribes to it late gets a value. It's not stuck waiting around for something to come out. And so if we were to come in here and change you to a behavior subject, so we'll give it an initial value of orange, and you can see we're already getting that new value. And if we go to the details, we're also getting orange. Now we can update it to blue, and we come back here, and it's blue. So behavior subjects is great if you need kind of the concept of a store where there's persistent information, something's saved, but you don't want to have to set up all of the RxJS or Akita or any of the other state management options. And then there's a few others. We'll kind of go through them real quick. Replay subjects also they don't take an initial value, so you have to subscribe. So if you subscribe to it before anything is nexted, you get nothing. But they do take an argument of how many previous values you want to send out. So if you say, give me the last 10 values when you create your replay subject, and then something subscribes, they'll get up to the 10 most recent values. Never really had, well, no. This one's nice if you don't want an initial value, but you still want a behavior subject. You would do a replay subject with 1. And then you have to wait for something to emit before you start getting values. The last one is async subjects. This one I've never used. If you're familiar with the exhaust map, basically it's not going to emit any values until the subject has completed. So you could call next 1,000 times, and then once you call complete, your subscribers will only get the last value that comes out of it. And then by way of giving everybody homework, if you wanted to make it so that you could just put a query parameter in the URL to set the state, think about how you would go about doing that. I was going to, but it's already 6:41. My time is wrong. It's whatever, 12:41. And now for the fun challenge of switching laptops mid-presentation. So drum roll. Tim, right? No. Nope, Tim last. Richard.
So, how many of you guys are familiar with NGRX already? You guys? Are you guys okay if I don't go over the Redux pattern, actions, all that? Reducers. So, NGRX Data, it was just announced at NGConf, and what this is, it's NGRX, but a lot less boilerplate. That's basically what it is. And I've got a fun little picture here for you. So NGRX, the configuration for NGRX is actually pretty huge. John Papa, who presented the advanced workshop at NGConf, he created this NGRX data library, and it's now actually part of, it's an extension for NGRX. So he calculated it was about 500 lines of boilerplate for each entity. You're doing NGRX entities. So you've got your actions, you've got your state, you've got your types that are put into that state, and so it's a little crazy. NGRX Data automates that. It has the default REST methods that are hooked in there automatically for you. And it caches the data in the NGRX store. They make good choices as far as how to implement it with NGRX under the hood. And you can tap into anything NGRX with the NGRX data. So these are some links to check out. Right from the NGRX docs, they have information on NGRX data. Just bring that up actually. So right from their docs, they have this new section down here, which is for NGRX data, and so during the workshop, he had a lab that try. So you have just the Tour of Heroes app, and you add in NGRX, you add in the libraries, you add in a little bit of the configuration, and then you add in the NGRX data configuration. That's this entity map here. One of the links that I gave you here, the second one is the lab. So on the master branch has just the default Tour of Heroes, and then they have you add to it, and then on the finish branch, which I'll show you, has all the steps already completed. And then I don't know if we'll have enough time, but I could show you what NGRX entities look like before, but waste time. Yeah. All right. So if we look at configuration. All right. So with the configuration, you just pass in your entity config, which looks like this over here. But this is it. This is all the configuration. So the state is going to have hero and villains slices. NGRX calls it slices. But these are fully typed, and it's not actually shown here, but we can have that. I am not used to this Mac right now. So what they've done is they have a base service that you can extend, and you pass in the type. This is what it looks like right here. And I believe this right here is what connects the metadata to the type. So if you look at NGRX, well, I won't go into that. So this, out of the box, gives you all kinds of stuff. And bear with me a minute. To heroes concurrent. So I'm able to tap into the list of entities, and I can tap into the RxJS loading. This thing really likes to right click on me. But it gives you add, delete, your list, all of this out of the box for it. And I can't remember how John Papa, how he advertises like basically one-line configuration. You pass that to it, and it takes care of setting up NGRX. Are you guys familiar with the Redux Dev Tools? Anybody want to see what that looks like? Anybody interested? So here's the lab. I've got Redux Dev Tools. Can you guys see that? Okay. And you can see that it's initialized Redux with it's initialized NGRX, and it's issued a couple of commands. There's the query all, it's all the heroes, and then the success for it. These are the actions they're fired off. You can look at the payload inside of here, and then as you play with it, let's say I change this one, you can see there was an action dispatched to update, and here's the relevant data for it, and then there was a update success. And if you want, you can play this all back, and it steps through each one. You can look at the state for each action, or the state before and after each action. It's pretty cool stuff. But so this is the Redux Dev Tools. You would have to install it. It's a Chrome extension. So NGRX is really the Cadillac of state management. You can do so much with it, but it's really verbose. And hopefully with NGRX Data, you can start using it with your entities without having to code nearly as much. That's the big benefit of NGRX Data. Any other questions?
So how does that handle more customized requirements? For example, having multiple calls to different services in order to return.
So with NGRX, a lot of the communication to the server side is handled through effects. So you're affecting something, and so you might have an effect that basically listens to a type of action, like a save action. And once that's been fired, it passes that data up to the server. And then you might have another action when it comes back, like a saved success.
I guess more so like NGRX data, how does that work compared to
So this demo does not have any effects in it, but there's extension points throughout, so you can tap into it and add your own effects that you want.
All of the operations, but there's no paper connection. That's like that you can intercept it at any point at your own.
Yeah, you can have some configuration objects. You need to override that. Complete control if you want, or very small.
If you look at the documentation under Advanced and Extension Points, this is where you can tap into those things. Custom effects. But, yeah, that's mainly NGRX data. Any other questions? Or pass it over to Tony.
Okay. I'll show you guys a couple of things here. So I'm Tim Andrus. I'm not the last the best of all the game. They left me 8 minutes for a reason. So right now, I am an STG contractor working at WGU. One of the biggest needs at WGU with so many products, there hasn't been consistency across those products with the a core library or different style sheets. Honestly, it took them a year to update the color of a button because it was hard coded across 60 applications. Trying to find it, it was a mess. So what I've been working on is a core library that I created using the Angular CLI. I'm just going to quickly breeze through this, how it's done. You guys can look at the slides here. So you create a new project. I'm going to get into that folder, and then once I'm in that new project, I'm going to generate a library that I'm calling shared library here. Open up Visual Studio Code, that command. I'll show you the structure here in just a moment. But you'll see that there's some different things here. There's a projects folder underneath this that is not there traditionally. So, let's see if I can get that. Okay. So in this projects folder, if it wants to work, I think I'm too far away from my laptop. Landon, can you get that close? So you can see that I created this. Thank you. Such a good friend. So you can see that I created this WGU NGUI kit. Okay, and underneath that project, go to the source, and here's the library. What I've got here are the assets, and then I've got some primary elements and some of the more pro elements that are going to be used. Under assets, there are simple things like the font. I've got all my style sheets here. Again, I've got them, so I've set them up as Angular, some of the bootstrap conventions, and then some of the primary. You can see I've got animations in there. Quite a few different sassy cascading style sheets. Okay. I also this. Come on, buddy. Super responsive. So if you look at the primary elements here that I have, say for instance a badge. I'll take a look here at the HTML, pretty standard stuff. When I go in here are the classes that I've created as those inputs. So that's what you call in the application to determine which one you're going to use. I think the delay is fine. Yeah. So I also have some more pro, but what I'm able to do here, if I'm using this as a mono repo, I could have my application right here in the source. I actually have done this. I've created a tarball, and I'll show you the scripts that I use. So I created I copied the style sheets script. You can see what that entails. How to pack the archive, how to remove it when I'm going to rebuild it, and then the compile. So essentially, the compiler is going to copy and pack the archive. And then I just take this tarball right now, because we're in an environment where we're creating a lot of prototypes. So I just add the tarball down here to the application and import it in the node modules. So it's there available. I can call WGU navbar, put whatever class on it. You know, if I want to have user type in there, so it'll return a certain configuration of user type. Being a student, it'll bring up the student configuration in that application. But this now can be shared across all the applications. Again, there's something like 60 or 70 different products at WGU, and they can all have the same standard conventions. And when they look to white label this thing at some point, they can quickly go in and change some of these in that core library, and say in about a day have a white label version. So that's it in a nutshell for me. Any questions?
Are there any other steps that you can take?
Yeah, so you can publish it to NPM. When you create your account in NPM, and then you'll put those configurations in here, and you actually just NPM publish, and it publishes that package, and then you can import it. Is that what you're asking? See, in my project I'm using now, I don't think I have it up. No. Anyways, I actually added into my dependencies in the package JSON, and I have the tarball in there, so it actually will add that to my node modules when I install them. But I do want to publish them to NPM once we're ready to do that.
So libraries seem like a great candidate for dumb components, but I was wondering if you had a success putting smart components, things that have NGRX.
No, that's not really that's not really the purpose of.
So really, it's mostly just dumb components that can be shared across.
Exactly.
If you wanted to have anything in that contains state management, it's better to leave it.
You'll want to do that in the project. Yeah. It's not
really bad. That's what
yeah.
I've run into. Trying to right back now.
If you're thinking about sharing, you can create a shared library and not package it. Your shared smart logic, shared logic, that's smart, and then just package it to where you're going to have problems.
Yeah.
Monolith set is huge outside of it.
Yeah, if you want to use narwhals tools, that's one, or just
not much, but
That's an introduction.
So those are good questions. Does that make sense to everybody? I lay out the steps pretty simply in the slides, but with 8 minutes, I wasn't given much time. So, well, I appreciate you guys. I know we all appreciate you guys being here. It was really an honor to go to NGConf and to see the great Angular community and how it's thriving here in the Valley. Yeah, I highly recommend really sharpening your skill set in Angular. There's plenty of opportunities in this market for it. So
I just have a question. I guess really, all you guys are working with the same client?
us three.
Three?
Yeah.
I mean, just give a quick description of what's going on up there.
Yeah, so
What do they do?
WG is the largest online university in the world. There's 130,000 enrolled students. We're actually doing, they're doing an upgrade from AngularJS to 7, and we're actually doing a whole rewrite. So they're going to at the end of this fiscal, which is January or July 1st. They're going to pivot, and they're going to start using what we've been doing as their backbone for building the whole platform from scratch.
I just have one other question for you guys. Thank you. One of the things I've seen in years, it seems like it's just constantly changing. AngularJS 1 and 2, now they don't call it AngularJS 1, it's Angular 8. That kind of life cycle of this product, that prohibitive to it, or I mean, obviously it's getting better, but you're saying from AngularJS,
They're not the same thing, but they're have to write it in a whole different. They shouldn't have called it. That's it's just wrong to call it. Really, what they wanted to do was take the Angular team, pull it off, and start a new project. Like Angular, you could call it for anything else. It's not Angular. And talking about the predictive nature of the ever-changing updates and how they tool AngularJS and how that's not good objects. After Angular 6, there are minimal to no breaking changes. Since Angular 6, there's been one breaking change. And they always publish breaking changes very publicly, and they always make sure that you're getting those breaking changes. And they're very, very, very minor.
Well, let me get to the heart of it. They're releasing every 6 months. So there's something that you can count on. Every 6 months there will be a new release candidate. Okay, so it's not like React where they're on version 18 or so now, where their releases are often and rapid. So Angular, at least you have the 6 months to kind of get things up to speed, and it's really, really great to have that scheduled release.
Yeah, one to 2 was a full rewrite, and then after 2, they're not doing like STEM versioning, but you could almost look at 2. You can almost look at version 8 as being 2.8.
I guess that's what throws people off.
Yeah.
Got to go to God. Customary. Almost making it like a whole new version. I'd like to invite you guys all to NGRX. We had 4 people go. All these presenters here go. But we would love to see those numbers go up. It was an awesome conference. The workshops are amazing. We would like to all see you guys there. Your local 2020.
Yeah.
It's down. It's here in Salt Lake. It's in Grand America. They host it there every year. And that's reversible from STG. So STG did provide that training for STG, full-time STG employees. So take advantage of that. It's always great to see people who are interested in getting those skills.
Nice to see you guys back there.
Like I said, one other question. I'm interested in doing CERT. I'm assuming this CERT is going to cover a lot of what we're talking about today.
Yeah,
It covers all of it. With the NGRX data as well?
No, sorry. It won't cover NGRX, it won't cover the
Okay. That's a good job, guys.
I spent an hour.
I showed somebody else's project.
Richard's a man. Thank you, guys.